any one of these bottles. You know, you can't go wrong. They're all great whiskey. There's something to appreciate about each one.
Mhm.
They have great history, which is also really fascinating to kind of dig into and understand a little bit more.
Welcome to Whiskey and SV. I'm your host Sam, and this is my friend Kevin.
Hi, everybody.
So today we're not in the regular studio. We're in San Francisco at Kevin's place. So it's Whiskey and SV, and is San Francisco considered part of Silicon Valley? Not really, right?
It's some
Bay
definitions.
Area?
Yeah, it's Bay Area. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Doing a little field trip out of the deep southern side of Silicon Valley.
Right. Yeah. So Kevin has been gracious enough to host this episode at his place, and we've decided what better way to do an episode than to kind of go through a collection of more baseline bourbons that you can get without breaking the bank, and you could still have, especially if you're starting out your bourbon and whiskey journey, you could get a lot of enjoyment out of.
That's right, Sam. A lot of people want to chase the expensive bottles, but there's a lot of stuff that's accessible at your fingertips. And we want to kind of walk y'all through this today, just to show you what is available today.
Cool. Yeah, let's get started then. So first we have here the Michter's small batch bourbon. So this is part of the core range that Michter's puts out. There's 4 of them, and let me see if I forget to remember them. So there's the small batch bourbon, which actually meets the definition of a bourbon, meaning it is 51% corn, and it was aged in new oak barrels, and whatever else the definitions are. But those are the 2 main ones. Then there is a American whiskey, which I believe uses used barrels, so it's not allowed to be called a bourbon. And there is a sour mash, which apparently doesn't meet the definition of at least 50% corn.
They hint at it. They don't actually explicitly state it. Michter's keeps things pretty close to the chest, but they had mentioned that the mash bill they had a lot of rye in their mash bill, which suggested that the mash bill might not meet the standards of bourbon.
I see. And then they have a rye as well, right? The small batch rye. Oh, it's a single barrel rye.
It's a single barrel.
Single barrel rye. That one's actually my favorite of the bunch. But since we're doing bourbons, we tried the bourbon this time.
Yeah.
Okay. Next in this lineup, we have the Elijah Craig small batch. Of course, we always rant and rave about how good the barrel proof variant of this is. But every time I have this base one, if I go to a bar that doesn't carry like a bunch of more geeky kind of whiskeys, I gravitate towards this because it's really great, and it comes at a really affordable price. I think this small bottle is probably like in order of like what, $15 or something.
I think so. I think I got off K&L for roughly that price, and then like the bigger one I've gotten from Costco for like $22, like the 750 for $22, which is incredible value. Yes,
and of course this is from Heaven Hill Distillery, which is one of the main distilleries that has a bunch of tailored bourbons. So and their Elijah Craig stuff is really great stuff. Third on our list, we have the namesake Buffalo Trace. So Buffalo Trace again is that brand that is tailored, and they have all the crazy sub brands like Weller and Pappy and blah blah blah. But they decided to put their own distillery name on this particular bourbon, and it's the one that is the most available and the most well priced. I think sometimes you can get this at Costco for around $22, $23. I see it very often at liquor stores other than Costco for even $20, marked down at $20. At some point, people were thinking that these are going to be tailored, but Buffalo Trace is putting so much of it out that it's staying at that around $20, $25 price, and it is mash bill 1, so it's really like all the other bourbons that everyone is
all the other sought after bourbons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, and you get your E.H. Taylor comes out of this line typically. Mm-hmm. You get Eagle Rare. You get your Stags. A lot of great bottles come out of this same mash bill.
Yep. So definitely a good one. You want to continue with the rest?
Sure thing. What we have here is Four Roses single barrel. This is not one of those picks, so this one's actually much more accessible. You can find it in most liquor stores in roughly the $40 to $50 price range. So what is this single barrel, and how does this relate to Four Roses? Well, this single barrel is their OBSV recipe. If you're familiar with Four Roses, they have 10 different recipes, and this is going to be the most predominantly seen one just because of how much they produce for all their other product lines. Next here we got Old Forester, 1897. The significance of this one is commemorating the Bottled and Bond Act, so this one is indeed bottled and bond. This is the 375 of this, but I think a bottle of this one is roughly going to be in somewhere in the $40 to $50 price range for the 750. Over here we have Knob Creek 9, which is part of Jim Beam's small batch collection. This is the entry one in the Knob series, and so this one's fantastic, and it actually has an age statement for being a value bourbon, which is really great. And then lastly, we have Russell's Reserve 10, which is probably one of the more pricey bottles up here we have. But it's got a 10-year age statement, which is not common for value bourbons. You have a couple other ones we've been talking about. Like you can get Eagle Rare, but that's a little bit harder to find.
Hard to find for sure.
This is so
available all day, every day.
Yeah, this is available everywhere, and I've seen it bundled with other Tater bottles in order to move it. And so you're going to probably get your hands on this at some point if you're trying to buy some of those bundles.
Yeah.
And so this one comes out of Wild Turkey, and it's named after Jimmy and Eddie and their son Bruce as well.
Cool. Yeah, we recently made a trip to Kentucky, and we met Jimmy, right? And he signed a bunch of our bottles. So
that's really right. Fun. That was a lot of fun seeing Jimmy.
Cool. All right. So what would be useful, I think, for us to kind of like go through each one of these and give a little bit of a tasting note for each one.
Yeah, let's do it. Just a little bit, please.
Thank you. Kevin is studying for the whiskey something. Wait.
Council of Whiskey Masters.
Council of Whiskey.
I'm working on a Master of Bourbon certification.
Very nice. So he's doing a lot of mini minor pours and not drinking it, but just spitting it out. So
when you go through 10 to 20 bottles a day, your liver thanks you if you don't drink it all.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's all about the responsible enjoyment of tastes and smells.
Yeah, and there's a difference between drinking it and tasting it, and so you bring a different level of intentionality when you're tasting it, and so you don't actually need to fully consume it in order to actually get most of the experience of what tasting bourbon's all about.
Makes sense. Okay, so
what are you getting off this one, Sam?
It's surprisingly oaky for something that doesn't have an age statement, and there's some sort of like creaminess to it.
Yeah, I'm getting that as well.
What is it? It's like 91.4 proof, so 45.7%. Not the most low proof, but I guess in the bourbon world that is considered low proof.
Especially in the enthusiast communities where a lot of people like the higher proof stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of flavor on the nose. You get a lot of good flavors for a low proof bourbon that just comes straight into the glass.
Mm-hmm. So I think for me, Michter's is quite distinctive in the way they do it. And you mentioned there's something about the process of how they distill or how they filter or something. What was that?
Yeah. So there's a couple different things that Michter's does that's a little bit out of the ordinary for other bourbons in the industry, especially one of their size, is that first and foremost, they have a barrel entry proof of 103, which is quite low. The maximum, which a lot of these other companies typically use and use, is about 125, and you're going to see that you get 125 off your Elijah Craig. You're going to get Jim Beam also does pretty high entry proof as well, and so.
And can you explain what it means if it's like lower barrel entry proof?
So what it means is that so for example, this expression here is at 45%, right? Mm-hmm. And so for them, after it goes through its period of aging, in the Kentucky rickhouses, what typically happens is that some of these whiskeys rise in proof. Mm-hmm. And so depending on what floor it is, and there's a lot of other characteristics, but essentially water evaporation what causes the whiskeys to rise in proof. And so what a lower barrel entry proof allows you to do is when you want to proof it back down to 45%, you don't lose as much of the viscosity and the different esters that are developed through the maturation process. And so you get a lot more flavorful bourbon because you're not watering it down nearly as much. And so, however, there's a lot of drawbacks too, especially economically, because when you're storing 125 proof bourbon, you can get a lot more ABV per unit. And so it's more expensive for them to produce it in this way.
Yeah. I guess that's why the MSRP on their base stuff is $40 versus, much cheaper on the other ones, I guess.
I think that's right. Yeah. That sounds right.
Okay.
And the other thing they do proudly is chill filter, which is not a very common thing.
Right. That's like something that people like to, at least enthusiasts don't want to hear, right?
Right.
Is their 10-year also chill filter? Do you know that?
All of their products are.
All of their products are.
Yeah.
That's really good stuff. So I didn't spit, but
it's okay. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, I will see how we go. Cool. Let's try the Elijah Craig.
I have to say this one's just one of my favorite value bourbons. It's
The Elijah Craig or the
Elijah Craig. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So they have also a slightly more expensive. Well, I guess it's double the price. It's not slightly more expensive. The toasted barrel. How do you think the toasted barrel compares to this?
A lot of people like the toasted barrel, and I've actually seen it sometimes marked up even more than the double the MSRP of this one. I personally prefer this expression.
Interesting. Okay.
And so everyone has their own preferences, but I really like this base expression here.
Honestly, when I at least early on in my journey, I tatered after a toasted one.
Yeah.
And when I tried it, I couldn't really tell the difference. I thought it was just it was a slight difference, but not enough to warrant because they're both 94 proof. So
what are you getting off this one?
Interestingly, it is coming across as a lot more muted than the Michter's to me, which is surprising because I in my mind this was way more flavorful, those kind of like sweet notes. But I'm coming off of the Michter's. This in comparison feels a bit muted. But just this is what I think when I think about bourbon. This is what I remember. Like to me, like the Michter's profile is definitely a little bit unique. When I think about Kentucky straight bourbon, I think Elijah Craig, I think Buffalo Trace, Mash Bill 1. Those are really kind of
they're pretty quintessential brands.
Yeah,
I think with the Michter's, what I was getting more of was like this like more oatmeal characteristic. You get a little bit more of the cereal. They use, like you were saying, there was still a good oak influence over the top of it. This one here is a lot more like floral and a little bit of like a slight citrusy note. And so it's like if you look at like your flavor wheels and like how you'd want to express bourbons, you couldn't be more opposite between these two, which is so fascinating. But they're both fantastic bourbons.
I think where I enjoy this more now is like on the palate. On the palate, like the flavors are just definitely like more along the lines of what I enjoy in a bourbon. I think
it's just classic bourbon flavors. You get
bourbon.
You get that brown sugar, a little bit of vanilla,
caramel, vanilla.
Exactly.
Nice bit of oak on the end.
Yeah, I can smell that all day. That's beautiful.
Good stuff. Let's go down to the Buffalo Trace. Excited for this one?
I am too.
So I tried this recently next to the Traveler whiskey, which is of course not necessarily. It's not officially a Buffalo Trace thing, right? Is it?
It's produced by them. It doesn't have like their namesake on it in any way.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's the Chris Stapleton Harlan Wheatley collab.
Oh yeah, it does say proudly blended and bottled by Buffalo Trace Distillery. Yeah. So this is the new tatered bottle that is done in collaboration with Chris Stapleton, which is the guy who there's so many weird things about that story, right? Because first of all, he's famous for Tennessee Whiskey song, right?
Yes.
So you would think that he should be like doing something with Jack Daniels or Dickel or something. And then on top, apparently he's sober.
I think that there's been that rumor's gone back and forth about whether or not he is or not, but I think that was the predominant rumor that he was. And so the community didn't really appreciate like, hey, like someone who is sober is now putting out a whiskey that just feels a little out of character, right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I love this nose. For me, Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 1 is it kind of like to me justifies why everyone loves it so much, because it's really is like the absolute quintessential bourbon nose, even more than the Heaven Hill stuff.
Yeah, this one is just amazing. It's an entry expression for all the bottles people tater over, but you can't sleep on this one. This one is just so good. I get a lot of like cherry, a little bit of oak influence, which is just.
I don't know how to explain this, put it in words, and maybe you have a better vocabulary for explaining this. There's something specific about Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 1 that I just described as the Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 1 experience. But how would you break it down? I mean, I don't know like what the proper words are.
I don't know if I have the proper words either, but I think what I usually get off Mash Bill 1, which this one's very characteristic of, is it's a lot of cherry notes. Strong oak influence, which is something that typically comes through on like an older product, and even this being an entry line, you're still getting oak. It's a good sign that they still put a good amount of age into it. I think it's roughly aged around
8 to 10. No, sorry, 6 to 8.
6 to 8, exactly.
6 to 8, yeah.
And so the fact that it's coming off at that age is quite nice.
Yeah. Of course, I think with bourbon you're always going to get like oak, but it's just like how it comes across is really important. Like this is like some like really nice sweet oak. Sometimes you get like a
Mhm.
more like bitter or like this funky type oak that
Like a
gives us-
stringent kind of almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very bitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's a
But this is
sweet
very
oak for
sweet
sure,
oak, yeah.
and it gives me like cherry cola.
Mm-hmm.
It's that when you get the sweet oak with the, it's just, it comes across as this like sweetened cola, and then the cherry elements because of the oak as well. It's just a great experience.
Okay, cool. So maybe should we move on to the Four Roses?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, Four Roses,
Okay.
single barrel.
So what's the deal with the single barrel versus small batch? Is single barrel like more desirable or?
You know, it really depends. I think that for a
Mhm.
long time, well, for a while, whiskey wasn't produced as single barrels. It wasn't until like the 80s in which Blanton's
Right.
really came to be, and Elmer T. Lee actually popularized the concept.
Mhm.
But you know, it's really what people look for in a single barrel is just a higher level of quality and almost the lack of consistency, because you want to be able to get different notes, different characteristics, and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's what's really, really nice about this one here is that Four Roses, they're very known for blending. They have all their 10 recipes and their core lines. They have the entry level one is the blend of all 10 recipes. The small batch is 4, and the small batch select is of 6.
Mhm.
And
all their expensive stuff is actually their blends, right? The 135th anniversary.
Yeah, the limited edition
limited
ones.
edition ones
Yeah,
are all blends.
Yeah, you have the yearly release, but they also have those anniversary blends as well.
Yeah,
they've just done such a good job, and it's kind of baked into their DNA. Coming back from, they were owned by Seagrams for quite a bit of time, from the 40s to like the 90s, and so they're all about Canadian whiskey is all about blending, and so the whole thing was like Four Roses took on that identity as well, and so they were able to. They almost went under for a little bit, but what they did is that they're able to actually bring back blending. Like Jim Rutledge really brought this brand back from the brink, and like he was able to showcase what really good blending can do, for a good whiskey.
Nice.
And so
I always get confused because there are always like these weird like acronyms or letters. What is it? OBSV?
Yeah. So the different letters. So the first letter is for the Old Prentice Distillery, which was the old distillery in which Four Roses was distilled, and it's where it's currently today.
Mm-hmm.
The second letter is the mash bill, and there's 2 different mash bills. There's a low rye and a high rye.
Mm-hmm.
This one here is the high rye. The single barrel is.
Okay.
That's what the B stands for, as opposed to low rye is E.
Uh-huh.
S stands for straight bourbon whiskey.
Uh-huh.
And then
so the O and S are just basically like noise.
They're noise, yes.
Okay.
But it used to mean something back in the day when there was Seagrams had a bunch of bourbon distilleries.
Sure.
And then the last one is V, which is in this case it's V, but it's the yeast.
Okay.
As they have like O, E, S, Q, and V,
Okay.
signifying, which is interesting. It used to signify one of each of the Seagrams distilleries that produce bourbon that put into the blend. And so each of the distilleries had their own yeast, and so they preserved that through the years. It's just why they have all of these different yeast strains today.
I remember the first time I had Four Roses, it was very distinct, even though I wasn't experienced with bourbon yet. There's like the floral element to it is to me very unique, and I don't know, it's because when I think about, it's probably like I'm thinking roses and I'm thinking floral and probably getting floral, but
I also get a bit of fruit. I get some fruit on this as well.
Mm-hmm. What's kind of your marker and your main like kind of descriptives for Four Roses?
I think it's the floral combined with the fruitiness of it, which is, I typically get, all their different recipes have different characteristics, but when I look at the single barrel, the standard single barrel expression, I usually get like a fruity floral note, and it's raspberries typically come to mind for me.
This definitely comes across to me as like a higher rye kind of bourbon. I think
it is. Yeah. It's 35% rye. Fantastic whiskey.
Mm-hmm. You really can't go wrong with any of these. I mean, honestly, like if we weren't like getting into this nerdy world of like you have to get like the crazy latest release, like you could pick this apart, sit down and like talk about them for a long time and enjoy it anyway. All right, should we try the next one?
Let's do it. So what are we pouring here, Sam?
So this one is the Old Forester something or another, 1897. Okay, so this is the bottle and bond, which you said, I think you mentioned is not their lower tier stuff. This is like kind of mid tier.
It's mid tier, but like it's roughly around the same price range as you're getting from the Michter's or the Four Roses single barrel. So it's not going to break the bank looking at the Whiskey Row series, which is what this one comes from.
The Whiskey Row series. I don't. What is your marker for Old Forester?
My marker for Old Forester is kind of this yeasty banana on the
Yeasty
nose.
banana.
You also get a little bit on the palate, sometimes a little bit of a banana bread.
Do you get that on here?
They're definitely on the nose. And then when it comes to the palate, like some of these expressions, I typically get more of like a cereal note, like more of like the grain profile, and that graininess plus the banana kind of gives me this banana bread.
I think I don't have enough experience with Old Forester to kind of like have a marker for it. And I keep hearing about this banana or banana bread thing, and I think the first time we met, I told you like I've never got banana on any.
You were almost about to get to a fight about that. Like, there's no banana in whiskey. It's like, well, yeah, you're right, but
I think out of these so far, though, the one that stuck out as like kind of the most unique to me is the Michter's, and the one that I think I enjoyed the most probably is the Buffalo Trace. And going in, I thought Elijah Craig would be my favorite.
I hate to agree with you. I'm in a similar position, but I think it's just because I don't know. You and I have shared so much Buffalo Trace together. It's there's also a nostalgia element to that bottle as well.
For sure. So Jim Beam is huge now because they're the Beam Suntory Corporation. So one of the biggest distilleries in Japan. Thank you. The Suntory Corporation, which has the Yamazakis, I believe, and Hibiki and all those, and Hakushu. So they either merged or bought the Beam Distillery, and Jim Beam is like a huge distillery. We visited them as a last kind of our parting distillery that we visited when we were in Kentucky. And who's the guy who was telling us all the stories? It was
Fred No.
Fred No.
Yeah, Fred No. He is a great storyteller and speaker, and it was a good time.
Yeah, he was telling us some of these stories about old times. I don't remember all the stories, but I remember we had fun kind of listening to him. He talked a little bit about like the takeover and going to Japan and like tasting some of their stuff and how he was apprehensive at the start, maybe about like the merger or the acquisition, and then he understood that they love whiskey, he loves whiskey, so it's going to work out. And yeah, so it seemed like he was happy about it, which is a good story, because usually you hear someone selling out their family business and then they get like, these people are coming in and messing everything up, and it seems like that's not the case there. So
yeah, I mean, I haven't really seen a big shift in Beam products since the takeover, so it seems that if anything, it's allowed to have infusions of capital and all these other benefits of merging of these distilleries, and we get new products like Legion. So it's kind of interesting. Like sometimes when you get these mergers, some of these distilleries, cease to exist, or their products are no longer the same. Someone comes in and tries to change the financials around, which changes the quality of the product. And I don't think you see that with this particular distillery, which is great.
For sure. So for me, the Jim Beam characteristic is definitely peanuts. When I smell Jim Beam, it's very distinctly peanuts.
My first whiskey that I ever kind of made my eyes light up, and I was like, oh, I get it. And I kind of cracked through the wall and like understood that like how great whiskey can be. Booker's. And so the peanut note that you get off of this Knob Creek and any Jim Beam product, there's like a special place in my heart.
Nice.
I love it.
And this is a very inexpensive product. I mean, you can find it at Costco, maybe sometimes like a 1.5 liter of it for like $35 or $40 or something like that, right?
Yeah, I bought one the other day for a party for cocktail mixing.
It's great stuff.
It's great in a cocktail too. So
it's like relatively high proof compared to the other ones as well. Is it 50? 100 proof?
Yeah, it's 100. So I think we have a couple. These three here have all been 100.
Okay.
Let me double check. Yes, it is 100.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I really like this.
You get a little bit of that oak influence too.
It has age stated, right?
It's age stated. It's 9 years.
And when they say 9, they mean like minimum 9. So it could actually be more, probably, right?
It's possible.
We have all these stories where it happened like with Michter's, the recent tenure. There's two reasons why distilleries don't want to change the name, but still like put older whiskey in there, right? One is because like they have to go back to the TDSB?
The TTB, yeah. They have to go through like relabeling TTSB.
So it's like basically the licensing board that gives them like the right to put certain things on the label, like that's all regulated, right? And they just the TTB doesn't care if you put like older whiskey in there. They just don't want you to put younger whiskey in there. So if you have something that says like 9-year, you're allowed to put like 18-year whiskey in there if you want, right? But you just can't put anything younger than 9 because they don't want you to like rip off the consumers, right? And famously, Michter's their this year's 10-year is like what, like 15, 16, 17-year whiskey.
Yeah, it's rumored. Yeah,
Rumored to be.
again, Michter's is always.
Yeah, you never know.
You never really know, but
Yeah.
it was like I think it was like 14, 15-year whiskeys, which is fantastic.
Mhm.
I've got a couple bottles on my shelf back here too, where like they have like an age statement of like 11 years, but you can see the bottling distillation dates. It was clearly 13 years, and that's always just a great score, knowing that people are looking at the age statement and you're getting something slightly older than what you expected.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, let's get to our last one.
All right. Why don't you take this? I'm just going to do a little rinse.
Yep. So this one is the Russell's Reserve 10-year, and surprisingly, despite having a 10-year statement, this bottle doesn't get a lot of love, which is kind of strange to me, and probably strange because I don't know how, but Wild Turkey manages to put a lot of this stuff out, and it ends up in bundles. So a local liquor store that's we frequent at, whenever we try to like get something that is more hard to get, they want us to buy these base stuff, and it's kind of annoying because I don't want to have like multiples of that on my bar because I don't have room anymore. but it's actually like really great whiskey. So.
And I think the theme is that like any one of these bottles, you can't go wrong. They're all great whiskey. There's something to appreciate about each one.
Mm-hmm.
They have great history, which is also really fascinating to kind of dig into and understand a little bit more. But yeah, I think Russell's, that's one that should get a little bit more love than we see today. A lot of people, big fans. There's big Wild Turkey fans out there.
So what is your marker for Russell's or Wild Turkey in general, I guess?
I get a little bit, so when it comes to Russell's, my markers are a couple things. And sometimes I get this off like some of the other Wild Turkey products. Typically, I get a little bit of black pepper, which is, you get a little bit of that rye spice, that black pepper. I get cedar, so it's a woodiness, but it's not just like an oak, but like you kind of get some of these like other like woody elements. Like I typically get like a cedar off of it. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, which is usually kind of more subtle, I get a little hint of citrus.
Citrus.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's more of like a top note. It's kind of difficult to pick that one out sometimes, depending on my nose is doing that day.
How do you describe what is the differentiator between like woody versus cedar? Like how do you differentiate that? Like what is in your mind like the difference between like just oak or like cedar type?
It's just smelling a lot of different things, and so what typically when I was when I just remember growing up, like we had we'd sometimes get moths in our closets, and so like we'd get these like cedar planks, which was something that was used to like deter moths. And so the scent of cedar for me is something that I have kind of implanted and something I remember. And so when I smell this, the first thing I think is, oh, I get that woodiness, and then like you try to unpack it a little bit, and then you figure out, well, this is this scent memory that I have that I'm tapping into, and this is very specifically, it's a cedar note that I'm getting.
I see.
I think in general, though, I need to do a lot more work just to smell different things and expand my understanding of just scents in general.
So one thing that's that I was very surprised was when we went to Heaven Hill Distillery and we did the bottle your own.
Yeah, that was a great experience.
Yeah,
I still got the bottle right here.
Nice.
Yeah,
I should open mine. It was great. The thing that was really cool was when we went into that experience room afterwards, they had these long test tubes with cotton at the end of them, and there was like a little book next to it with all the different scents. And I think out of what is it, like there was like 21 cents or something, or there was in order of 20 cents, right?
Something like that. Yeah,
I think I got like 6 right or 7 right the first time I did it. So I think it's really important to get like a kit like that and just train your nose to be able to have the right vocabulary, because I just get like completely I get completely lost when I especially when it's like mixed in a bunch of things.
Yeah.
But even when it's not, when it's just like okay, this is supposed to be oak. Well, the oak is the easy one, but like leather, for example.
Right.
Like I think the first time I said leather is more like smoke, and it was just like, dude.
I think also just talking about it, right? Like, for example, you and I, we've debated the banana note for a long time, just like, and you've always, I know when you talk about American single malts, you always bring up this like metallic notes. Exactly. And so I think it's just sitting down, talking with people about what notes you're getting, just to kind of be able to
what they mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like, I'm just like, I'm experiencing something, and then I'm blurting out a word, and that doesn't necessarily like map to the same experience in someone else. And it's like really important to sit down with your friends to kind of, if you're trying to pick out something that he likes, then you kind of have to know what he means when he says like, I like that thing. Because when I say I don't like metallic, what does that really mean? Like,
yeah, it's tough. And yeah. I think also there's a lot of subjectivity, right? Like, you're going to read tasting notes online, or someone's going to have like 6 or 7 notes for each, for like the nose, the palate, the finish each. And, it's a humbling thing to like sit down, like try to sit down with a glass of whiskey and try to get some notes, let alone 6 to 7. Don't be discouraged. It takes some time, and it really, like, the improvements and progress you get happens in steps. I'm nowhere near an expert on any of this, but I've definitely seen a big progression in my understanding. I think you've seen the same thing, right? You do a lot of tasting notes, you write them a lot online, and you can even tell like the notes you're pulling out sometimes are a little bit more sophisticated over time. Like, is it fruit? Like, what kind of fruit? Is it red fruit? Oh, it tastes like an apple or smells like an apple. You can kind of start elevating those notes.
And it is something that you can learn. I mean, of course, some people, it's like anything else. If you're picking up a sport, maybe you're like naturally gifted and you're just going to be great since day one, and you can pick everything apart, and it's just like, I was not one of those people, but like the more time I'm putting in, the more progression I see, and the more I can pick apart, and it's rewarding. It's a rewarding experience for sure. The other thing I would add is, like, I think like we have some friends that like just say, okay, I never watch YouTube because people's notes are not worth shit, and like it's whatever. And I my thought process on that is, yes, if you're just looking at like a video in in a vacuum, and you're trying to see if it's going to be useful, probably not. But if you follow a person long enough, and you understand their vocabulary as it pertains to your own experience, as long as that person is consistent with their notes, then you can take something away from that, because you can say, okay, well, when this person says this, to me that experience feels like that, and then you can kind of make your mind up of that, whether you're going to enjoy that experience or not, right? So of course, no one's going to be perfect, consistent 100% of the time. No one's going to be even have the same preferences over time, but it's a good signal. I mean, there's like so much variety of things you can spend your money on, and we have limited space and limited money, so you gotta spend do the homework basically, and try to kind of see who aligns with your own tastes and experiences more. So you can kind of benefit from their insights, and hopefully also put something back out there to help others with their experiences.
That's good advice, Sam.
Cool. Well, this has been a great episode. I think it's going to be a really long one. So these are the ones that I enjoy the most. But we'll see how everyone else enjoys it. So thank you so much, Kevin, for hosting, and for being part of this episode.
Thanks, Sam.
And belated happy birthday. So we'll go out and have some fun tonight, hopefully.
Yeah, responsible fun. That's why we're spitting out right now.
Yes, you are.
Oh man.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Take care.